Alright guys, this is my table saw along with some jigs and stuff that I want to talk about, but I wanted to show you guys the front end of this saw. Again, I got this on Craigslist. It's a Delta 10-inch contractor saw. I don't remember the model. I don't know the model number, at least I don't remember it. I knew it at one time, but it's pretty old, I would guess. It's in great shape though. You know, the structure is all solid. All the gears and everything that change the blade height and all that kind of stuff are all real nice and solid. It originally came with a little tiny flick switch right here for the on and off. And that wasn't going to work for me, especially because I knew I was going to be building out this fence. And so to reach all the way under there and flick this tiny little switch on and off was going to be hard. So I got this paddle stop on off switch, which has been awesome. Built this box for it. There's a lot of wiring and those wires are pretty thick. And so I had to make this box a little bit bigger than I wanted. And I got this idea off John Heiss's table saw. This whole table saw was pretty much inspiration off John Heiss. I'll try to put a bunch of links in the bottom of this video, in the description of this video, to John Heiss's table saw stuff. He has made his own table saw. He's rebuilt other table saws. Those were a lot of his projects a while ago, back in the day. And some of those table saws what gave me inspiration for this one. Like I said, I got this on Craigslist, and when I first got it, I'll try to include pictures of it when I first got it in this video. And it was in pretty tough shape. The top cast iron of the table saw, the table of the table saw was in pretty bad shape. It had a lot of rust and everything, and so I took a lot of time sanding it and trying to get majority of those blemishes out of the table. And then I ended up putting polyurethane on the table, which has limited the amount of rust that is going to develop on the cast iron. But anyway, I added this switch. It's easy to hit this switch with my knee when I'm, I got my hands up here. I can hit the off switch with my knee, and the on switch is hard to get to, so it's not going to get bumped on. So that's been really nice. Other than that, on the front of this table saw, I built this rail, I guess you would say. This is the rail that the rip fence rides along. This is a John Heiss project. This is something that he has a video for and plans for. I bought those plans right when I got this table saw, was when he came out with this rip fence design. When I bought this, it didn't have a rip fence, which is kind of important for a table saw. And so when he came out with this design, I immediately bought those plans and built it, and it has been awesome. It has worked super well. I'll get into the details of it in just a moment, but you got the rail right here, the on and off switch, and then I built a little shelf with some 1/4-inch plywood surrounding the three sides of this internal cavity, and that's to try to contain as much sawdust as I can, kind of turn this into a cabinet saw. And I also put it on casters. I upgraded these casters from some smaller ones that were previously on there. These are really cheap. I believe I got these at Harbor Freight. But I don't roll around too much. They're there if I need it, which is fine. So let me adjust this camera and we'll swing around to the back and take a look at the motor and everything. Alright guys, so this is the back of the table saw. This is the motor that came with it when I bought it. And I made this stupid mistake of not doing like a test cut or not even turning the motor on when I went to go see the guy and when I went to see the saw for the first time. And so when I brought it home, I turned it on and it ran, and I set up like a, jimmy rigged fence with just a 2x4 clamped on and tried to run some wood through it. And the motor like seized up. The blade stopped spinning, the motor seized up, and it sounded like messed up. And I was kind of getting nervous, and then I started researching getting new motor and all that kind of stuff. And then I was kind of losing it. I was searching all over the internet trying to figure out what might be wrong with the motor. The motor looked fine. There wasn't any issues. It didn't even really look too used. So I came across something at like midnight. I'm searching the internet and I came across something that said, when I first saw the guy from Craigslist, he said it's wired for 120. He said you can wire for 240, but it was currently set up for 120. So I said, okay, perfect. Take it home, issues. I go online, searching for a couple days, a week, and I finally come across something. And somebody asked the question, my motor sounds weird, whatever, and somebody said it sounds like it's wired for 240, and you're trying to run it at 120. And I go, maybe it is. And so I researched. I didn't know what that meant. And I said, okay, whatever, maybe I can try to figure this out. So I Google, how do you wire something 120, 140, or 240? And long story short, it was set up for 240. I was trying to run it at 120. So it was just taking this cap off, replacing, rewiring the inside. And rewiring to me sounded like, oh my God, rewiring, what does that mean? It's just, this one's labeled T1, this one's labeled T2. They're connected to other things. You gotta tie these two together with one of those little screw nut things. And so it's just like 8 cables that you gotta arrange differently. And there's a diagram in there that tells you, or right here, that tells you exactly how to do that, or what needs to be connected to what. And then I flipped it on, and I probably screamed so loud in joy in the middle of the night, I probably woke up our neighbors. But it was awesome to have the motor running well. It was like, after struggling with it for so long, it was awesome to have it working, and I didn't have to spend any more money on it, which was sweet. This is the belt that originally came with it, and it's in okay. Actually, I think I bought this belt, but the belt that came on it was in bad shape, and I wanted to upgrade that. I didn't know too much about these link belts. Different people have different opinions on how beneficial they are, but I decided to go with one, and it's awesome. I haven't used a normal V-belt with this saw ever, so I can't give a comparison, reliable comparison, but the V-belt performs awesome. I don't have any issues with it, in other words. So that's the motor, that's the V-belt. I took apart this entire saw. So I took the motor off, I took all the gears and the arbor, I took the entire arbor out. I forget which bearing, it might have been both bearings, but I had to take the arbor out of the assembly, the trunnion assembly, or whatever all that stuff is in there, and I took the arbor out of its position in there, and I had to replace those bearings. Those bearings I had to order online. Don't remember how much they were, but I think it was advisable. I think it was a good move doing that. And then I, put everything back together. I cleaned everything up. I used a wire brush to get any there was a lot of sawdust in there, obviously. There was some rust and stuff, so I cleaned it all up. I lubed up all those gears so that I knew for sure everything was gonna be tight, everything was gonna be lubed up, everything's gonna be in good shape. Those bearings are what's gonna wear out, the easiest. So I just went the safe route and replaced them. I didn't want to mess around with it, but I took everything apart. The cast iron, everything bolts off of the cast iron. It was pretty straightforward. It's not rocket science. It's just a matter of taking it apart piece by piece, taking pictures along the way to remember where things go and all that kind of stuff. And it's a great process to do because you get a good understanding of how the machine is set up. So after that, that's when I started working on the rip fence and all that kind of stuff, along with these extension wings. These extension wings are plywood, and I pretty much modeled this off John Heiss's table saw, one of his old table saws that he had. I was trying to find, this saw originally came with one extension wing. It was probably like a pressed metal, whatever kind of metal it was, and it just bolted onto one side. That's all I had. I just had one extension wing, no rip fence. So I said, I was trying to look online for extension wings for this saw or other extension wings that I could drill and tap that I could attach to this saw. I wanted cast iron ones though. I wanted them to be solid, and I couldn't really find anything, at least I couldn't find anything cheap. And it was pretty hard to find regardless, no matter how much money I was going to spend. So I just said, okay, I'll try building some wood extension wings. which was a good process. It was a good learning experience. I think it's fairly solid. I had to add a lot of like bracing and to make it nice and sturdy, but it's come out great. I don't have any, it doesn't get in my way when I work with this machine anymore. So I feel like that's a good solution to the problem. If I don't notice it and I don't even know it's there, then there's no problem with it. So it's worked really well. Extension wings, and then obviously that rip fence. And like I said, I will connect to those videos in the description of this video. I got a new wire or a new plug that runs to an extension cord that goes to that wall. Extension cord's in a little bit of a walkway, but it's not too big of a deal. I know it's there, so I don't really hit it too often. This saw came with this throat plate. The throat plate did not have a hole in it, and it's a little bit big of a gap here, so I wanted to make a zero clearance throat plate. I first drilled a hole in this one because it's a lot easier to get this throat plate on and off when you can stick your finger in there. I just did it in a spot where it wasn't going to be an issue. It's out of the way. It's not going to get in the way of any cuts or anything. So that's something that I would advise. And then I built this zero clearance throat plate out of some plywood. I think this is 5/8 inch plywood. I was planning on, having to kind of fiddle with it to make it flush with the top of the table, but it turned out that it was the right size. I didn't have to mess around with it at all. I drilled a hole in it. I lowered the blade all the way down, started the machine, and then raised the blade through the zero clearance, holding this down with the rip fence. And that's what gave my zero clearance slot in there. I also put a little pin in here. It's just a nail pounded in, and I cut it off so that it hooks onto the back of the saw. So that's that. I recently upgraded the table saw blade to a thin kerf rip blade, which has been awesome. And I have a couple other items here that I'd like to show you guys. So let me reposition this camera and I'll show you that in a sec. Alright, so a couple things I want to show you guys. First is this miter gauge. I got this miter gauge online a couple weeks ago. It's an Incra miter V120. It was pretty much the same price. When I bought this, it was the same price as their lesser model. From what I read online, this one indexes on every degree, I believe. Just about every degree. This can lock into, each degree. The other one, I don't know for sure, but it wasn't every degree. It was maybe every 5 degrees or whatever. But so I just figured get the better one because they were pretty much the same price anyway. I used this on the horse racing game build, and I didn't have this fence on here when I did that, which was a mistake. I definitely advise attaching a fence like this. I didn't have, at the time of the horse racing game build, I didn't have screws that I wanted to use. I wanted to use certain screws to screw this on, and I didn't have what I needed at the time, so I just went ahead without a fence, and it was probably not a good idea. Using a fence, you got a lot more control, and so this is a cool thing to have. It's adjustable here, and it fits in these miter slots. That's another thing with the old table saw that I had, the Ryobi. The table saw miter slots on the Ryobi were like a ridiculous size. I don't even remember. These are normally 3/4 of an inch. A normal table saw has miter slots that are 3/4 of an inch. The Ryobi, it was like a T-track, maybe like 5/8 of an inch, or I don't know. It was like a really weird size. So like I made a crosscut sled for it a long time ago, and making runners for that was a nightmare. So that's another thing I have to say about the Ryobi table saw. Another thing I have here is a John Heiss made, well, I made it, but it's John Heiss's design for a tapering jig. I used this one on the horse racing game also. I had to use it because I had to joint an edge of that board and I couldn't do it any other way. So I used this. This is a sweet thing. It's a tapering jig. You can use it for joining material also. I will link the video that he has for this one. I bought the plans and built this, and I haven't used it a ton, but when I need it, it has come in super handy. So I will link the video that he has to this jig, and that is that. Just got this dado stack a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago. I was going to use it for the horse racing game, but I came up with a different way. Instead of for if you saw that video, there's some dividers going across the width of the board, and I was planning on maybe insetting those walnut strips in the board instead of cutting the entire piece and gluing those strips in. But I didn't do it that way. That's why I got this dado stack. I've always wanted the dado stack. It was a good excuse to get it, but I haven't used it yet. I'm excited for it in the future. Push stick, John Heiss style. I'll put a link to it. It's pretty self-explanatory. And then the rip fence. The rip fence is awesome. I highly recommend it. It is super solid. It's adjustable. You can fit it to your saw. It bolts directly to the cast iron. I drilled and tapped holes in the cast iron so that it's nice and anchored there. And then I also screwed it with wood screws into the external extension wings. And it's not going anywhere. I got a measuring tape here. It gives me pretty accurate measurements, and it's solid. So props to John Heiss on that also. And I feel like this is a John Heiss commercial. So anyway, that's the table saw, and let's move on to the next section. Guys, another feature of this table saw that I forgot about was this dust collection. It's not really dust collection in the sense where it's collecting everything, but it's the best I can do with this setup. So I enclosed this box to make it more like a cabinet saw. Like I said, I added a shelf to the bottom here, and then I have this bucket, which is just like a plastic drawer from some plastic drawers that I used to have, and it just collects all the dust that falls down. This is a piece that came off when I didn't have my zero clearance insert or throat plate on the saw, and so that slid through. That was a little scary, but does a pretty good job of dust collection. As you guys can see, this is probably a couple weeks worth of dust, and so that's good to have. I empty that out once in a while once that gets full. But I wanted to make sure I noted that because I showed you guys the enclosed 3 other sides of the little bottom section of this table saw. I wanted to make sure I showed you that little shelf down there. It's not plumbed for the shop vac, or I don't have a big dust collector, but it's not plumbed for that. I would have to enclose this whole area, enclose this, and then get a little port for the shop vac to hook up to. I don't want to mess with that. You got the link belt going through that way, and so it wouldn't be really airtight to be super effective, but that little drawer works well for my purposes.